NatRefs Show, a weekly podcast on the ever-changing world of natural refrigerants, brought to you by Sheco, with support from component manufacturer Teco. My name is Charlotte McLaughlin, reporter in Europe, and I will be hosting today's show from Sheco's European office in Belgium. I'm joined today by my colleague Michael Gary, editor of Accelerate America and North American editor of Sheco's websites, and also by reporter in Asia Pacific region, Devin Yoshimoto. So this week we have a lot of stories. So first up, me and Devin will discuss Nidec, who has just bought Embraco from Whirlpool. And we'll be going into more depth on this story as well. Then I will talk to Devin about ALDI and speaking at Atmo Australia and a small preview of what will happen during the Atmosphere conference in Australia. Then I will finish the show with some discussion about IIAR and codes and regulations that have been updated and regulations that they also want updated as well. So the big news last week was that the Whirlpool Corporation, who owns majority shares in Embraco, the Brazilian multinational manufacturer of hydrocarbon-based compressors, has decided to sell that to Japanese company Nidec. This is quite big news. I'm sure a lot of people are now talking about it. So Nidec, what it's acquired through acquiring Embraco is multiple subsidiaries all around the world, excluding Embraco Europe. So these include Embraco Indústria de Compressors, based in Brazil, Ealing Company, based in Uruguay, Embraco Slovakia, Embraco Luxembourg, and two China entities that will be combined into one holding company that Nidec will then buy, basically. So yeah, it's big news for the market, and one of a big development. Whirlpool said that they've decided to sell the Embraco business because it's more of a business-to-business company, because Embraco sells hydrocarbon compressors, so they basically sell that to cabinet manufacturers, etc. And Whirlpool CEO basically said that this transaction enhances our strategic focus on investing in and growing our consumer-facing business. So that's the reason they've given to basically sell Embraco to Nidec.
Yes, and that's also very interesting because Nidec also announced last year that they were purchasing CCOP, another manufacturer of hydrocarbon compressors. So maybe it's a signal that the Japanese, the very big Japanese company Nidec is seeing a big opportunity for hydrocarbon compressor manufacturers in the market.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll know more when we get some comments from key stakeholders who are involved. Okay, so moving on. Devin, you have big news about ALDI in Australia. Can you tell me more about the story that's just been published in Accelerate Australia and New Zealand?
Sure. Well, the big news actually is that ALDI is going to be speaking at Atmosphere Australia, our Atmosphere Australia event, which is coming up very soon. It's going to be on the 7th of May, so just about a little bit over a week to go. And ALDI is a really key end user to be speaking about natural refrigerant installations at the conference because they're going to be joining all the other large retailers for Australia. But what we have is a story about them in the Accelerate Australia issue that was just published, showing where they've been through and what they've been able to do with natural refrigerants leading up to today, and leading up to what they're going to be talking about. So basically what ALDI has done is in Australia, they've been installing Cascade CO2 R134A refrigeration systems since about 2012. And now they're up to around 300 stores with Cascade installations. And we spoke with Marcus Meyer, who is going to be speaking at Atmosphere Australia. And he also commented to us about this story in the magazine where he said that they've already achieved a 10 to 15% energy reduction just with these Cascade installations. And he told us a little bit more about how the company started installing transcritical CO2 systems, which they said started back in 2007, which is, as you know, a really long time ago, before these developments with technology for transcritical CO2 working in warm temperatures and really the availability of technicians to handle this system was in place at that time.
Devin, we know that in Europe they're installing a lot of transcritical CO2 systems. In Australia, have they made any moves to move those cascade systems to CO2 transcritical?
Yeah, well, what Marcus told us was that they basically in Australia they've been following very closely what ALDI in Europe has been doing and ALDI in the U.S., which we also know ALDI in the U.S. is a leader for transcritical CO2 systems. So what we know now is that ALDI Australia now has 5 stores using transcritical CO2 and a 6th underway this year. And they're really just getting started gathering data and doing analysis for these systems that have these first systems that have been installed. And it's really kind of paving the way to more installations in the future, which I'm sure Marcus is going to be telling us more about at Atmosphere Australia on the 7th of May.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, Devin.
Thanks, Charlotte.
And moving on to IIAR. So as I understand it, Michael, IIAR is now lobbying the EPA to update regulations on ammonia because the US Environmental Protection Agency regulates the charge amount and puts more regulation the higher the charges are for ammonia in industrial refrigeration. So what's happening here, Michael? Can you tell me more about this?
Thank you, Charlotte. So there's a lot going on in the U.S. with respect to ammonia regulations. The IIAR, International Institute of Ammonia Refrigeration, is working with the Trump administration's EPA to make some suggestions on changes in the regulations. They're trying to take advantage of what Lowell Randall, the Director of Government Affairs at IIAR, said at the IIAR conference last month. He said that the Trump administration's regulatory reform efforts represent an opportunity for IIAR to promote its own reform initiatives. So as an example, the IIAR is pursuing the creation of a new category of aerosol or gas ammonia leaks to replace the standard now that applies to liquid ammonia leaks. Thereby, they'll be able to raise the minimum reportable threshold, the minimum at which they have to report a leak, from 100 pounds up to 500 pounds for gas leaks. They're also looking at changing the how long they have to report a leak to the EPA from like 15 minutes to 8 hours, because they feel that reporting to the EPA, actually the National Response Center at the EPA, is something they don't need to do right away. It's something that can wait, whereas they have to report right away to local authorities. So they're making requests like that. They also, IIAR also wants to make a change in the risk management plan rule that was passed, approved by the Obama administration's EPA, but has been put on hold by the Trump administration, and IIAR wants to change a provision pertaining to the requirement for independent third-party audits. They want to get away from that. So there's another chance for them to influence what's going on in Washington. Of course, the main reason they can do that is that the Trump administration is always open to, deregulating or rolling back regulations that were put forth.
So, Michael, if IIAR is looking at the EPA regulations, are they also looking at OSHA regulations as well?
They are. That's a good question, but to a lesser degree. I would say that they seem to be focused mostly on EPA. OSHA, they're kind of. I think they are also talking to OSHA. But Lowell Randall really focused mostly on what their plans are for EPA. But OSHA also regulates ammonia safety, and so they do have to pay attention to that. Another speaker there at the IIAR conference last month, Jeff Shapiro he's a code consultant for IIAR, talked about how many of the national and international industry code bodies are incorporating IIAR ammonia safety standards in their latest updates, in their 2018 updates. So here again, the IIAR has been successful in convincing these code organizations that ammonia should be treated differently from other refrigerants and that they should refer to the experts on ammonia, namely IIAR, in terms of following the IIAR's safety standards.
So is this just American organizations, or is it also organizations throughout the world who are embracing these standards?
Yes. For example, the International Fire Code is a global group. They're no longer referencing ASHRAE for ammonia. Instead, they are turning to, when it comes to alarm and detection issues as relates to ammonia, they're looking at what the IIAR has in its recently updated safety standard, IIAR 2. The Uniform Mechanical Code is also making an adjustment. It's now, in fact, they've excluded ammonia entirely from their code because the IIAR 2 standards includes all necessary information. And what the IIAR ultimately wants to do in the laying the groundwork to what Shapiro said, getting out from under the umbrella of ASHRAE 15. They want ammonia to be removed from ASHRAE 15 and instead have these code bodies refer just to their IIAR 2. So basically IIAR is really trying to set itself up as the global standard for safety, for ammonia safety, and recommending that that all code bodies defer to it as the expert, as the authority, and not ASHRAE 15. They seem to be having some success in going forward with that. That's it for me.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Michael, for your time. This is all we have time for this week on the NatRef show. We hope to see you again next week.